Velthak stood in the bright white room aboard the Cytherian command ship. His purple skin reflected the cold lights above as he read his orders on the glowing screen. The words were clear and simple. Watch the humans fight, learn their weaknesses, report back. The tall alien had served the Cytherian Intelligence Corps for 20 years. He had watched many battles on many worlds. Most of the time, the fights were quick and boring. Primitive species would run when they saw real warriors coming. The humans would probably do the same thing. Commander Zexthon walked into the room. His silver uniform showed his high rank. Velthak, you understand your mission? Yes, Commander. I will watch the humans on Kepler 442b. They are fighting the Ravager swarms there. Good. The humans have been holding that world for 3 months now. Our computers say they should have lost in 3 days. Zexthon looked annoyed. Find out how they are still alive. Find their tricks. Then we will know how to beat them when the time comes. Velthak nodded. The Cytherians had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They were the strongest warriors, had the best weapons, and knew the most about war. These humans were new to space. They had only left their home world 50 years ago. How could they stand against the Ravagers when much stronger species had fallen? 2 hours later, Velthak sat in a small transport ship heading down to the planet.
He had changed his appearance to look more human-like.
His skin was now pale instead of purple. His eyes were brown instead of gold. The machine had even given him human clothes and papers that said he was a war reporter. The planet below looked red and angry. Smoke rose from many places. Bright flashes of light showed where fighting was happening. The ship shook as explosions went off in the distance. First time seeing humans fight? Asked the pilot, a young Cytherian named Morgan. Yes, have you seen them before? Once. They are strange. They do not fight like normal people. They do things that make no sense. Morgan shook his head. My brother was in the fleet that first met them. He said they would not surrender even when they were beaten. They kept fighting until every ship was destroyed. The transport landed at a human base. Velthak walked down the ramp and breathed the planet's air. It smelled like smoke and burned metal. In the distance, he could hear the sound of guns firing and explosions. A human soldier walked up to him. She was shorter than Velthak but stood very straight. Her uniform was dirty and had small holes in it. You must be the reporter. I am Captain So Young Park. Yes, I am Velthak. Thank you for letting me stay with your unit. So Young smiled. It was a real smile. Not the fake ones Velthak usually saw from other species when they met Cytherians. We are happy to have you. Any friend who wants to tell our story is welcome here. She led him through the base. Human soldiers were everywhere. Some were cleaning weapons. Others were digging deeper trenches. A few were sitting together and laughing about something. Velthak was surprised. These humans knew they were probably going to die, but they did not look scared or sad. This is Major Hyunwoo Kim, So Young said as they reached a large tent. He leads our battalion. The major was a big man with kind eyes. His hands were dirty from working. Welcome to our little war, friend. I hope you brought good shoes. We do a lot of walking here. Velthak looked at the major's equipment. His armor was old and had been fixed many times. His weapon was a simple kinetic rifle that shot metal bullets. Cytherian soldiers had energy weapons that could cut through anything. They had shields that could stop almost all attacks. These humans had tools that were hundreds of years old. Sir, what do you think your chances are? Velthak asked. Hyunwoo laughed. Chances? Friend, we stopped thinking about chances when the Ravagers first showed up. We just do our job. But the enemy has more soldiers than you. Their weapons are stronger. Maybe. But they do not have Sergeant Tae-min Lee. The major pointed to an older soldier who was teaching younger troops how to set traps. That man has been fighting for 20 years. He knows every trick there is. Sergeant Tae-min walked over when he heard his name. His face had many scars, but his eyes were bright and alert. Major, this the alien reporter? Yes. Be nice to him, Tae-min. The sergeant looked at Velthak carefully. You picked a bad time to visit, friend. The bugs are getting ready for their big push. Should be fun. Are you not worried? Velthak asked. Tae-min laughed. Worried? Son, I stopped being worried when I realized something important. We are not here to win. We are here to make sure the evacuation ships have time to get the civilians out. Every day we hold this line is another 1,000 people who get to live. This confused Velthak. Cytherian soldiers fought to win. They fought for glory and honor. Why would anyone fight knowing they would lose? That night, Velthak sat in a small room and started writing his first report. He described the human weapons and their positions. He wrote about their numbers and their supplies. But he kept thinking about what Sergeant Tae Min had said. Outside his window, he could see human soldiers sitting around small fires. They were talking quietly and sharing food. Some were writing letters. Others were looking at pictures. One young soldier was crying while an older one put a hand on his shoulder. These humans were not like any warriors Velthak had ever seen. They seemed to care more about each other than about winning battles. They were gentle with each other, but he could see the hard look in their eyes when they talked about the enemy. A loud alarm started ringing. Red lights began flashing all over the base. Velthak heard soldiers running and shouting orders. Captain So Young appeared at his door. "The attack is starting early," she said. "Stay close to me if you want to live to write your story." Velthak grabbed his recording equipment and followed her into the night. In the distance, he could see thousands of small lights moving toward them. The Ravagers were coming. He was about to learn why humans were different from every other species in the galaxy. The sun came up red and angry over the battlefield. Velthak crouched in a concrete bunker next to Captain So Young, watching through thick glass as the enemy moved closer. The Ravagers looked like giant insects made of black crystal. They moved in perfect lines across the empty ground between the forests and the human base. "How many?" So Young asked the soldier next to her. "At least 50,000 in the first wave, Captain. Maybe more behind the trees." Velthak felt his breathing get faster. 50,000 enemies against maybe 3,000 humans. This would be over quickly. He checked his recording equipment to make sure it would capture the human defeat properly. "All units, this is Major Kim," came the voice over the radio. "Remember what we talked about. Hold your positions. Make every shot count. Take care of each other out there." The first explosion started when the Ravagers got close to the human traps. Bright flashes lit up the morning sky. But there were so many enemies that the mines and bombs barely slowed them down. "Open fire," So Young shouted into her radio. The human weapons began shooting. Velthak could hear the rapid fire of their old kinetic rifles and the deeper sound of their heavy guns. The noise was incredible. He watched through the viewing window as bullets and energy blasts flew in both directions, but the Ravagers kept coming. They climbed over their own dead and ran straight at the human positions. Some of them were as big as ground vehicles. Others were small and fast, jumping from rock to rock like deadly spiders. Velthak expected the humans to break and run when they saw how many enemies there were. Any smart species would retreat when faced with impossible odds. That was basic military thinking. Instead, something else happened. Private Jin Ho Choi was in a fighting hole about 200 meters away. Velthak could see him clearly through his viewing scope. The young human looked maybe 18 years old. When a group of Ravagers overran his position, Jin Ho did not run. He kept firing his rifle until it was empty. Then he pulled out his sidearm and kept shooting. When that was empty too, he drew a combat knife and fought the creatures hand to hand. "Why is he not retreating?" Velthak asked So Young. She looked at him like he had asked why water was wet. "Because his squad mates are counting on him." "Because people are depending on all of us," Jin Ho fought until 3 Ravagers pulled him down. But his actions gave other soldiers time to reposition and call in artillery support. His death saved dozens of other lives. Velthak wrote this down, but he did not understand it. Throwing away your life for a few extra minutes made no tactical sense. On the second day, he watched Corporal Ara Song do something even more confusing. Her squad was surrounded in a forward observation post. They were calling in artillery strikes on enemy positions when the Ravagers got too close. "Fire mission, grid 347521, Ara said into her radio. "Danger close." "We are at grid 347521. The voice on the other end sounded worried. "Ara, that is right on top of you. You need to move." "Negative. We have 40 bugs climbing the hill right behind us. If they take this position, they will have a clear shot at the medical station." "Fire the mission." "Ara, no. We can find another way." "There is no other way." "Fire the damn mission." "That is an order." The artillery shells landed exactly where Ara had called them. The explosion destroyed the observation post and killed all 6 humans inside. But it also killed the Ravagers who would have attacked. The medical station where 50 wounded soldiers were being treated. Velthak stared at the smoking crater where brave humans had just killed themselves to save others. In Catherian military doctrine, this was called acceptable losses. But these humans had chosen to become acceptable losses. They had volunteered to die. On the third day, Major Hyunwoo received an evacuation offer from a Catherian fleet in orbit. They could take him and his senior officers to safety. "Thank you for the offer," Hyunwoo said over the communication channel, "but I will stay with my soldiers. Major, your position cannot be held. You have done well, but this battle is lost. Maybe it is lost, but my people are still fighting, so I am still fighting. That is not logical. Logic has nothing to do with it. The Catherian ships left without taking anyone." Velthak could not believe what he had heard. A commanding officer who would not abandon his troops, who chose to die with them instead of living to fight another day. This went against everything he knew about military leadership. But as he watched the battle continue, Velthak began to see something strange. The humans fought harder when they knew their leader was still with them. They took bigger risks to help each other. They held positions that should have been abandoned hours ago. On the fourth day, he met a human medic named Yujin Kang. She was treating wounded soldiers in an underground medical bunker. What shocked Velthak was that she was also treating wounded Ravagers. "Why are you helping the enemy?" he asked her. Yujin looked up from bandaging a Ravager's leg. The creature was unconscious from pain medication. "Because they are hurt. Because helping someone who is hurt is the right thing to do. But they were trying to kill you." "Yes, and tomorrow they might try again, but right now they are just hurt and scared like anyone else." Velthak watched her work for hours. She moved between human and Ravager patients without any difference in care. When supplies ran low, she gave the best medicine to whoever needed it most, regardless of species. This was completely alien to Velthak. Catherians did not waste resources on enemies. Enemies were eliminated, not healed. On the fifth day, a piece of shrapnel from an explosion cut Velthak's arm. He had been trying to help evacuate civilians from a damaged building when a Ravager bomb went off nearby. Yujin treated his wound with gentle hands. "You did not have to help those people," she said as she cleaned his cut. "You are just here to watch. I do not know why I did it," she smiled at him. "Yes, you do. You did it because it was right. Because those people needed help and you could give it." As she worked, Yujin told him about her family back on Earth. Her parents ran a small farm. Her brother was studying to be a teacher. Simple, peaceful lives that she might never see again. "Do you regret coming here?" Velthak asked. "No. These people need someone to take care of them. If I can save even one life, then everything else is worth it." That night, Velthak lay awake thinking about what he had seen. These humans were not primitive or stupid. They were something else entirely. They fought not because they thought they could win, but because fighting was the right thing to do. They died not because they were careless with their lives, but because they cared more about other lives than their own. For the first time in his life, Velthak began to understand what humans called courage. It was not the absence of fear. It was acting in spite of fear because others were counting on you. The battle was far from over, but already Velthak knew his report would be very different from what his commanders expected. The fighting stopped for 3 hours on the sixth day. Both sides were exhausted and needed time to regroup. Velthak walked through the human base, stepping carefully around broken equipment and damaged buildings. The air smelled like smoke and medicine and something else he could not name. He found Lieutenant Donghyun Nam sitting alone outside the communications bunker. The young officer was staring at a small piece of metal in his hands. Velthak sat down next to him without being invited. "What is that?" Velthak asked. "Dog tags," Donghyun said quietly. "They belong to my squad. All of them." Velthak looked closer. There were 12 sets of metal tags, each with a name and number stamped into them. "They all died?" 3 days ago. "We were holding the North Ridge when the bugs broke through. I was the only one who made it back." Donghyun's voice was very quiet. 12 good people. Private Hana was only 19. Corporal Minsu had a baby daughter he had never met. Velthak expected to see a broken soldier. In Catherian military culture, losing your entire unit was a sign of failure. Officers who suffered such losses were often demoted or removed from command. But Donghyun did not look ashamed. He looked sad but not defeated. "Are you not angry?" Velthak asked. "Do you not blame your commanders for sending you to die?" Donghyun looked at him with surprise. "Angry at who?" "The Ravagers are just following their nature. They eat everything they find." Major Kim made the best decisions he could with the information he had. "My squad knew the risks when we took that position." "Then why do you look so sad?" "Because 12 good people are dead. and the universe is smaller because they are gone. Dong Hyun put the dog tags in his pocket carefully. But I am not angry. Anger would not bring them back. Anger would not help the people who are still alive. This confused Velthak even more. If you are not angry, why do you keep fighting? Dong Hyun was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. Because someone has to. Because there are things in this universe worth protecting, even when you know you cannot win, especially when you know you cannot win. He pointed toward the medical bunker where Yujin was still working. She's been awake for 36 hours straight, taking care of wounded soldiers and civilians. She could have evacuated days ago, but she stays because people need her. Then he pointed to a group of soldiers sharing their food with refugee children. Those men have not had a hot meal in a week, but they give their rations to kids who are scared and hungry. They do it because it is right. Velthak watched the scene Dong Hyun described. Human soldiers were kneeling down to talk to small children, making them laugh despite the sound of distant explosions. One soldier was showing a little girl how to fold paper into the shape of a bird. We do not fight because we are strong. Dong Hyun continued. We fight because we are weak and we know what it feels like to be afraid and alone. We fight because someone should stand between the darkness and the light, even if we get consumed in the process. That evening, Velthak found himself in the medical bunker again. Yujin was changing bandages on a wounded ravager. The creature had regained consciousness and was making frightened clicking sounds. It is afraid, Yujin explained to Velthak. They are not just mindless killers. They feel pain and fear like everyone else. But they destroy everything they touch. Yes, but that does not mean they deserve to suffer. She finished the bandage and gave the ravager some water. It drank gratefully. Causing pain because someone caused you pain just makes more pain. It does not fix anything. Velthak watched her work and tried to understand. Catherians believed in strength and dominance. You conquered your enemies or you were conquered by them. This human philosophy of treating enemies with kindness was completely foreign to him. Later that night, Yujin showed him something that changed everything he thought he knew about warfare. In a quiet corner of the bunker, the humans had built a memorial wall. It was covered with names and pictures of soldiers who had died in the fighting. But what surprised Velthak was that the wall also had names and pictures of dead ravagers. Why do you honor your enemies? He asked. Because they were alive, Yujin said simply. Because they had thoughts and feelings and dreams just like us. Because dying is sad no matter who does it. She pointed to a picture of a small ravager. This one was barely adult when it died. Maybe it had a family somewhere. Maybe it was scared when it came here to fight. We will never know its story, but it deserves to be remembered. Velthak stared at the wall for a long time. In all his years of observing warfare, he had never seen anything like this. Soldiers who mourned their enemies. Warriors who carried sorrow for every life lost, regardless of which side they had fought for. Is this why you fight so hard? He asked. Because you understand the cost? Yujin nodded. Every death matters. Every life that ends makes the universe a little darker. We fight not because we enjoy it, but because sometimes fighting is the only way to protect something beautiful. She showed him another section of the wall dedicated to civilians who had died in the fighting, families who had been evacuated too late, children who had been caught in bombing runs, old people who had refused to leave their homes. These people never wanted to be part of a war, Yujin said. They just wanted to live quiet, happy lives. But the war found them anyway. So we fight to make sure fewer people have to die for no reason. The next morning, Velthak helped Yujin treat wounded soldiers. His hands shook the first time he had to clean a serious wound, but she guided him patiently. When he accidentally hurt a patient while learning to change bandages, Yujin did not criticize him. Healing takes practice, she said, but trying to help is always better than not trying at all. As he worked, Velthak began to understand something important about human warfare. It was not about defeating enemies or claiming territory. It was about protecting the ability of good things to exist in a dangerous universe. The humans fought with such determination, not because they were fearless, but because they were afraid of losing the things they loved. They carried the weight of every death because they understood that life was precious and rare. That afternoon, during another brief pause in the fighting, Velthak sat with Sergeant Taemin Lee. The older soldier was cleaning his weapon and humming a quiet song. You have been watching us for a week now, Taemin said without looking up. What do you think of us? Velthak considered his answer carefully. I think you are the strangest warriors I have ever seen. Taemin laughed. Strange how? You fight like you have already lost, but you never give up. You treat your enemies better than most species treat their allies. You carry sadness for people you have never met. That is because sadness is not weakness, Taemin said. Sadness means you understand what you are fighting for. It means you know the difference between what should be and what is. He finished cleaning his rifle and looked directly at Veltek. A warrior who feels nothing when people die is not strong. He is just empty, and empty people cannot protect anything worth protecting. As night fell and the sounds of approaching enemies grew louder again, Velthak realized that his mission had completely changed. He was no longer just observing human military tactics. He was learning what it meant to care about something bigger than yourself. The final Ravager attack came with the force of a hurricane. Velthak had never seen so many enemies in one place. They covered the ground like a black tide, stretching from the forest to the horizon. The sound of their movement was like thunder that never stopped. This is it, Major Hyunwoo said over the radio. All units, remember why we are here. The evacuation ships are 90 minutes out. We just need to hold for 90 more minutes. Velthak stood in the command bunker next to Captain So-young, but his hands were no longer holding recording equipment. Instead, he gripped a human rifle that Sergeant Taemin had given him 3 days earlier. You do not have to fight, So-young had told him. You are here to observe. But Velthak had replied, I cannot just watch anymore. Now, as the enemy closed in, he understood what he meant. Watching these humans sacrifice themselves while he stood safely on the sidelines felt wrong. It felt like betrayal. The first wave of Ravagers hit the outer defenses like a hammer striking glass. Explosions lit up the dawn sky as mines and booby traps went off. But there were too many enemies. They climbed over their own dead and kept coming. Sector 7 is being overrun, came a voice over the radio. Sector 4 needs reinforcements. We have bugs in the trenches at Sector 2. Velthak found himself running through the battle with Sergeant Taemin's squad. They were trying to reach a group of civilians who had been trapped when a building collapsed. The sound of gunfire was everywhere. The air smelled like burned metal and fear. Contact front, shouted Private Chan Woo-yoon, a young soldier who reminded Velthak of Jin-ho. 3 large Ravagers had gotten between the squad and the trapped civilians. The humans spread out and began firing. Velthak tried to use his rifle the way Taemin had taught him. His first shots missed, but his fourth one hit a Ravager in what might have been its shoulder. Then everything went wrong. A Ravager grenade landed right in the middle of the squad. Velthak saw it bounce once and roll toward where 2 other soldiers were taking cover. Private Chan-woo saw it too. Without hesitation, he threw himself on top of the grenade just as it exploded. The sound was terrible. When the smoke cleared, Chan-woo was gone. But the 2 soldiers he had been trying to protect were alive and unhurt. Velthak knelt next to where Chan-woo had been and felt something break inside his chest. The young human had been alive and laughing just moments before. He had been telling Velthak about his girlfriend back home, about their plans to get married after the war. Now he was dead, and 2 other people were alive because of his choice. Why? Velthak whispered. Taemin put a hand on his shoulder. Because that is what good people do. They take the pain so others do not have to. They reached the trapped civilians and began digging them out of the rubble. Velthak worked with his hands until they bled, pulling away chunks of concrete to free a family with 3 small children. As they carried the youngest child to safety, the little girl looked up at him with big, trusting eyes. Thank you, mister, she said in a tiny voice. Velthak felt tears running down his face. He had never cried before in his life. Back at the command center, the situation was getting worse. Captain So-young was coordinating the defense while injuries covered half her face. She had been hurt when a Ravager bomber attacked her position, but she refused to go to the medical bunker. Ma'am, you need medical attention, one of her soldiers said. I need to do my job, she replied. The medics are busy with people who are hurt worse than me. She continued calling in artillery strikes and moving troops to where they were needed most. Velthak watched her work and realized she was saving hundreds of lives with every decision she made. Then her radio crackled with bad news. Captain, this is Lieutenant Kim at Sector 5. We are completely surrounded. Request permission to withdraw. So-young looked at her tactical display. If Sector 5 fell, the Ravagers would have a clear path to the landing zones where the evacuation ships would arrive. Negative, Lieutenant. Hold your position. Ma'am, we have 23 soldiers left out of 200. We cannot hold much longer. You have to hold. If you fall back, 3,000 civilians will die when the ships try to land. There was a long pause. Then Lieutenant Kim's voice came back, calm and steady. Understood, Captain. We will hold. Velthak never heard from Sector 5 again. 23 humans died in that position, so that 3,000 civilians could live. So Young marked their location on her map with a red X and continued her work. With 30 minutes left until the evacuation ships arrived, Major Hyun-woo made the hardest decision of the war. The Ravagers had broken through in too many places. The base could not be held any longer. All units begin fighting withdrawal to the landing zones, he ordered. Destroy everything that might be useful to the enemy. But there was a problem. The base's reactor core contained enough energy to power a small city. If the Ravagers captured it, they could use that power to attack other human worlds. The reactor has to be destroyed manually, the chief engineer reported. Someone needs to stay behind and trigger the overload sequence. Major Hyun-woo looked around the command bunker at his remaining officers. Captain So-young, Lieutenant Dong-hyun, Sergeant Taemin, and a few others. All good people who deserve to live. I will do it, he said quietly. Sir, no, So-young protested. Let me stay. You are needed to lead the evacuation. The evacuation will happen with or without me, but it will not happen at all if that reactor falls into enemy hands. Hyun-woo turned to Velthak. Friend, you have been with us for this whole fight. Will you tell people what happened here? Will you tell them that we tried to do the right thing? Velthak could barely speak. Yes, I will tell them. The evacuation ships arrived exactly on time. Velthak found himself being pushed toward one of the loading ramps along with dozens of wounded soldiers and frightened civilians. He looked back and saw Major Hyun-woo standing alone in the command bunker, his hand on the reactor controls. Go, Hyun-woo said over the radio. Get our people out of here. The ships lifted off just as the reactor exploded. The blast was so bright that it turned the sky white for several seconds. When Velthak's vision cleared, the human base was gone. So was Major Hyun-woo. As the evacuation fleet moved away from the planet, Velthak sat in the medical bay and tried to process what he had seen. Yoo-jin Kang was working next to him, treating wounded soldiers and civilians with the same gentle hands she had always used. Are you all right? She asked him. I do not know, Velthak replied honestly.
I have never felt anything like this before. Like what?
Like my heart is breaking. Like something important has been lost forever. Yoo-jin nodded sadly. That is grief. It is what happens when you care about people and then lose them. Does it ever stop hurting? No, but it changes. It becomes something you carry with you, like a weight that reminds you of what mattered. Velthak looked out the window at the burning planet below. Hundreds of good humans had died there. People who had chosen to sacrifice themselves so that others could live. People who had carried sorrow for everyone they could not save. For the first time, Velthak understood what Sergeant Taemin had meant. The weight of caring was not weakness. It was the foundation of everything that made life worth living. And now, whether he wanted it or not, Velthak carried that weight too. 3 weeks later, Velthak sat in his small quarters aboard the Cytherian command ship. The walls were white and clean, just like they had always been. But everything felt different now. The bright light seemed too harsh. The silence felt empty instead of peaceful. In front of him was a blank report screen, waiting for his assessment of human military capabilities. He had been staring at it for 6 hours. How do you measure courage? How do you put a tactical value on soldiers who fight hardest when they know they are going to lose? How do you write about people who treat their enemies with kindness? Velthak tried to start the report 3 times. Each time he deleted everything and began again. The words his commanders wanted to read felt wrong. They wanted to know about human weaknesses, about ways to defeat them in battle. But after watching Major Hyun-woo die to save strangers, after seeing Yoo-jin treat wounded enemies with gentle hands, after carrying the weight of real loss for the first time in his life, Velthak could not write what they wanted to hear. Instead, he found himself writing about Yoon-ji Kim, a communications officer who had died keeping the evacuation ships connected to the ground forces. She had stayed at her post while the command center collapsed around her, making sure that every civilian transport knew where to land safely. He wrote about Seok Jin-oh, an engineer who had rigged the base's water treatment plant to explode when the Ravagers overran it. Seok Jin had been wounded and could barely walk, but he had crawled through enemy fire to set the charges because he knew the Ravagers needed that facility to establish a permanent base. He wrote about Private Hana, the 19-year-old soldier from Lieutenant Dong Hyun's squad. According to the reports, she had died holding a medical station so that wounded civilians could be evacuated. Her body had been found surrounded by dead Ravagers, her rifle empty, her medical supplies scattered around injured people she had been trying to save. But none of this was what Admiral Zexthon wanted to read. "Observer Veltek," came the Admiral's voice over the communication system. "Report to my office immediately." Velthak walked through the ship's corridors like he was moving through a dream. Everything looked exactly the same as it had a month ago, but he felt like a different person. The Catherian soldiers he passed in the hallways looked confident and strong, but also somehow empty. They moved with purpose, but Velthak wondered what they were moving toward. Admiral Zexthon's office was large and impressive. The walls were covered with battle honors and trophies from defeated enemies. The Admiral himself was tall and imposing, with the silver skin that marked him as one of the oldest and most experienced Kytherian warriors. "Velthak, where is your report?" "I am still working on it, Admiral. You have been back for 3 weeks. How long does it take to document primitive human tactics?" Velthak chose his words carefully. "The humans are not primitive, sir. They are different. Different how? Do they have secret weapons? Advanced technology we do not know about?" "No, sir. Their weapons are exactly what our intelligence reported. Old kinetic rifles, basic energy shields, chemical explosives. Nothing we could not easily defeat in open battle." Admiral Zexthon looked confused. "Then what is taking so long?" "Write the report. Describe their weaknesses. Recommend how we can defeat them when the time comes." "That is the problem, sir. I am not sure we can defeat them." The Admiral's face darkened. "Explain." Velthak took a deep breath. "They do not fight like we do. They do not care about winning or losing. They care about protecting things that are important to them. That makes them unpredictable. Sentiment is weakness, observer. Emotional attachments make soldiers hesitate at crucial moments. With respect, sir, I do not think that is true. I watched human soldiers make incredible sacrifices to save people they had never met. I saw them fight harder when they knew they were going to die than most species fight when they think they can win." Admiral Zexthon stood up and walked to the large window that showed the stars outside. "Velthak, you have been with intelligence for 20 years. You have observed dozens of species in combat. Why are these humans affecting you so strangely?" "Because they showed me something I had never seen before," which was, soldiers who fight not because they enjoy it, but because fighting is sometimes necessary to protect good things. Warriors who carry sorrow for every life lost, including enemy lives. People who understand that strength means being willing to sacrifice yourself for others." The Admiral turned back to face him. "That is not strength. That is foolishness. A warrior's job is to eliminate enemies, not to mourn them." "Then why are the humans still alive, sir? Our computers said they should have lost Kepler 442b in 3 days. They held it for 3 months. They only lost it when they chose to destroy their own base rather than let the enemy use it." This seemed to bother Admiral Zexthon. He sat back down and activated his personal computer. "Show me the tactical analysis. How many Ravagers did the humans kill?" "Approximately 200,000, sir." "How many humans died?" "About 8,000. 25 to 1 kill ratio. That is impressive but not impossible with good defensive positions." "Yes, sir. But that is not the important number." "What do you mean?" Velthak pulled up another set of statistics. "The humans evacuated over 50,000 civilians from that planet. Families, children, elderly people, wounded soldiers. They moved them all to safety while fighting a defensive battle against overwhelming odds. So they were not fighting to win territory or defeat enemies, sir. They were fighting to save lives. Every tactical decision they made was based on protecting other people, not on military advantage." Admiral Zexthon looked at the numbers again. 50,000 evacuees. That is significant. "Yes, sir. And according to intercepted communications, those civilians are being relocated to 12 different human colonies. They will start new lives, have children, build communities. The humans do not see this battle as a defeat. They see it as a success because they saved 50,000 futures." The Admiral was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Less confident, more thoughtful. "Velthak, in your professional opinion, what would happen if the Catherian Empire went to war against the human colonies?" We would win, sir. Our technology is superior. Our fleet is larger. Our soldiers are better trained, but it would cost us everything that makes us who we are. The humans would make us fight for every star system, every planet, every city. They would never surrender as long as there were still people to protect. And somewhere in that kind of war, we would stop being honorable warriors and become something else. What do you mean? Velthak thought about Yujin treating wounded ravagers with the same care she gave to human soldiers. He thought about Major Hyunwoo refusing evacuation so he could stay with his troops. He thought about the memorial wall that honored both human and enemy dead. We would become the kind of people who do not remember the cost of what we do, the kind who see other lives as acceptable losses, the kind who fight without carrying any sorrow for what is lost. Admiral Zexthon stared at him for a long moment. Write your report, observer, but write the truth, not what you think we want to hear. Yes, sir. That night, Velthak finally began writing the report that mattered. Not the one about human weaknesses or tactical vulnerabilities. Instead, he wrote about the strength that comes from caring about others more than yourself, about the courage that grows from understanding what you are fighting to protect, about the wisdom of carrying sorrow for all the lives that war destroys. He wrote about warriors who measured victory not in enemies defeated, but in innocents saved. About soldiers who found their greatest strength in their capacity to grieve for both friend and foe. It was not the report his commanders expected. But it was the only report he could write honestly, and as he worked through the night, Velthak realized that he was no longer the same person who had started this mission. The humans had changed him, just as surely as if they had rebuilt him from the inside out. He now carried their sorrow. And somehow, that weight made him feel more alive than he had ever felt before.